Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dante. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. It's been a few years. What have you been up to in the last few years? Actually, better yet, before we talk about that, let's introduce you to the audience that may not be aware of you. I believe you're originally from the East Coast.
That's right.
New York, to be exact.
That's right. Yep.
Studied there. How did you get involved in music? You know, what led you to music? What led you to the piano and vocals? And how did you start?
Well, when I was 4 years old, my mom and dad, we lived in New York City at the time. My dad's mother lived in Virginia, in Martinsville, Virginia.
Oh, nice.
So we decided to take a family vacation. So we drove down to Martinsville, Virginia, and we walked in the house, a little small house that my grandmother had. And it was probably, I want to say it was like maybe October, November, because it was getting cold there in the mountains, you know, it get cold at night.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got there, and my grandmother had this, piano, acoustic piano on her porch. It was a screened-in porch, so it was not heated out there, right?
Okay.
And so I was fascinated by this piano. So the first night that we were there, I woke up, I was sleeping between my mom and dad, and I woke up, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I went outside, opened up the door, and I started banging on what I call the boom boom. I woke the whole house up, and they all came to the door, the front door, the porch, you know, the door that led to the porch, and they said, "Wow, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm just playing the boom boom, you know." And they said, "Well, you know, it's kind of cold out here, you better go to bed." So they took me back to bed. I would go to bed. The next night, the same thing happened. Woke everybody up. They all came outside, and you know, I told them I was playing the boom boom. And so I watched this whole thing happen because, you know, I never did it again while we were there. But I remember listening to this conversation between my mother and my grandmother, and I just caught the tail end of the conversation. I remember my mother saying, "Well, maybe I will." And I'm pretty sure my grandmother was talking about maybe you ought to give the boy lessons, you know. And so it was really, I was 4 years old, so it was really the first time I was getting to know my mom. I was waiting to see what she was going to do about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, we get back, and my birthday happens in late November, and by I guess probably it took my mom about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. It was like the next year, maybe February, March, something like that. I get an acoustic piano, and I started taking lessons. But before I got the acoustic piano, in January I started taking lessons. But I didn't have a piano, so I just I practiced on the kitchen table. And then a couple of months later, the piano arrived, and I later found out my grandmother gave my mother $25. But of course, you know, the piano even back then cost hundreds of dollars.
Right.
So my mother, she, you know, scraped it all together, was able to pull it off, and so got me an acoustic piano, and so I've been playing ever since. I was 5 years old when I started taking lessons.
Awesome. Now, if memory serves me correct, you did some studies at NYU and Ithaca College?
Yeah, so I did my undergraduate work at Ithaca College. So I went to, I was in the Manhattan School of Music in the preparatory division. So I came up, you know, in high school. I went to Music and Art High School, and so I came up with people like Ray Chu and Nat Adley. They were all friends of mine in school, and I studied in the preparatory division of Manhattan School of Music. Then I graduated high school, and I went to Ithaca College, and I graduated with a piano degree, and then I came back to New York, and I taught for a year. I taught junior high school, and was trying to get into the jazz scene in New York, and I had made a little headway. I worked with a guy by the name, who was kind of famous at the time. He used to be a guitar player for Sonny Rollins. His name was Yoshiaki Masuo, and I remember I played with him a couple of times. But
From Japan?
From Japan.
Okay.
And then I ended up, you know, getting a scholarship, actually. I was teaching junior high, but a performing arts junior high. And so we would put together a show, and at the end of the year we would tour it across the country. So we made a couple of stops. The last stop was Indiana University, and I met a guy by the name of Michael Gordon, who was a voice teacher, a music professor, who later became the dean of students at IU. And but before he became the dean of students, he came onto the bus as we had done our performance. We're heading back to Harlem now, East Harlem, where I was teaching junior high school at 109th and 2nd Avenue at Harvard Junior High for the Performing Arts.
Okay.
So we're heading back, And he gets on the bus and he said, and you, what about you? You know, because I had been seeing him, he'd been seeing me. We said hi, you know, a little bit over the weekend, but we never really sat down and talked.
Sure.
So he comes on the bus and he says, and you, what about you? And I said, well, how you doing? You know, and it just so happened that while I was teaching junior high school, I'd wake up really early in the morning. I was writing all this music that I thought I would never hear, but I was writing all these scores. I'd wake up at like, you know, 4 o'clock in the morning and just write before I went to school to teach, you know. And so I said, well, I'm a composer, you know, I love to write music and I'm a pianist, you know. And he said, really, you're a composer? I says, yeah. And he said, well, you know, why don't I introduce you to the chairman of the composition department here? Maybe you could study here, work on a master's or something like that. I said, well.
And what school was this?
This was Indiana University.
Indiana, okay.
Yeah, this is where we did our last performance.
Okay.
It turns out that the head of the performing arts division was friends with Michael Gordon. That's how the whole connection happened.
All right.
We got to go to IU to perform. So, so he said, well, you know, I said, well, I would love to study, but you know. He said, well, get off the bus. Get off the bus. And I was like, get off the bus, man. I got all these kids. I got to take all these kids back to Harlem, man. What are you talking about? You know?
It's a long way back.
A long way back. And so, I looked at Tom, who was the head of the Performing Arts Division. He said, get off the bus. And I looked at Cole Ginn, who was the principal of the school, and he said, get off the bus. So I got off the bus, and I spent 2 or 3 days with Michael and his family. He had 2 young daughters and his beautiful wife and all. They just welcomed me into their home, and he introduced me to the chairman of the composition department, who and they also introduced me to this woman by the name of Portia Maltsby, who was professor at IU. She was looking for a graduate assistant to help teach what she called the Indiana Soul Review.
Oh, nice.
And so I interviewed with her, and she loved me. I was actually perfect for what she needed. You know, it was like right up my alley. So I go back to New York, and all those scores I was writing was perfect. I sent all that back out to the chairman of the department, and he loved my music, and he offered me, you know, he said, hey, come on to Indiana University. And then Portia offered me a job that paid for everything, plus my room and board. It was just fabulous.
Nice.
You know, and so I went to IU, and I came home after spending 2 semesters there. I came home for the summer, and I was expecting to go back in September, but that's when I got the call to join Gloria Gaynor's band. Okay. And so I joined her band, and 2 months later I was her musical director, and I was with her for 5 years and never thought about going back to school to IU.
Now, what period would this have been? Of course, she was very big in the 70s.
This is the 70s.
Okay.
This is the 70s.
Okay.
That was 1978. The year that I just described was 1978. She was huge. Just got off of I Will Survive. I joined her band in 1979, and I was with her until 84.
How did you get the introduction to her band?
Well, her musical director was a guy I went to high school with. I went to music and arts, so all the talented kids from New York City went there. And so a lot of them didn't go to college. Okay. And so they were getting established in the music industry. So 4 years later, I come back home, and my friends are kind of established in the music industry. And this happened to be a friend of mine from around the way, as well as high school. And he said, hey, man, we're looking for a piano player. Okay. You know, would you come audition for Gloria, you know? I said, oh, hell yeah, I will. What
was the audition like? What did they have you do?
You know, to tell you the truth, man, I don't really remember very much about the audition, except that I walked in, there was a bunch of other musicians there, and we just sat down and played some music. She had charts for everything. Okay, so gotcha. Just pulled out the charts, and I just started reading away, you know? Okay. And there was never any talk about, oh, you got the gig or anything. It was just like, okay, you know, come back tomorrow, same time, you know? It was kind of like that. And then my friend, who was her musical director, I guess they had a little falling out or whatever about 2 months later. And they offered me the gig, so I became her musical director, and I was with her for 4.5 years, 5 years I was with her. You know, but as her musical director, a little over 4.5. You know? Nice. Yeah. Nice. And that's how I got started in the music industry.
Okay. Yeah. Now, okay, so that was back in the day, but those are excellent roots to pull from. What brought you to the West Coast, and how long has it been? I guess the time that you were sort of hitting with her per se to making the transition to the West Coast.
Oh, it was a lifetime, man.
Okay.
I spent my whole career in New York, and I worked with so many different people. But in 1992, I think it was, I got a call. And it was the first time that I ever worked with I got a call to work with an oldies act.
Okay.
The first time I ever did that in my career, because everybody that I was working with up, through 94 actually, were all like, it was their day. These guys in 92 it wasn't their day. Their day was back in the 60s. But the group I'm talking about, so 40 million records, consummate professionals, I mean, amazing. And they started in one genre of music and crossed over into popular music. And I remember being a kid hearing their first record, and I said to myself, yeah, it's okay, And then I remember in 1962, they came out with a song, I think it was 62, might have been 64. They came out with a song called Going Out of My Head. And I was saying, oh man, is that Little Anthony and the Imperials? I love these guys.
Wow, yeah.
And then they followed it up with another record called Hurt So Bad. And it was like, whoa.
Those are big hits.
Those were big hits for them.
Wes Montgomery covered at least the first one you mentioned. I think Wes Montgomery did the instrumental version of it.
That could be, yeah.
Going Out of My Head.
Yeah. So, and my first gig with them, are you kidding me, man, was at the Apollo Theater. I had never played the Apollo Theater before. It was my first gig with them, and you know who we were opening for? We were opening for, or maybe he was opening for us. I think he was opening for us, actually.
But still on the bill, some way.
Yeah, he was on the bill. Because I remember being in the wings with Little Anthony. We had just met each other. And he was telling me, he just liked me, So he was telling me, see what a master does, And he truly was. This guy I'm talking about was a master. Never saw a microphone technique like this before or after. He was a master. I'm talking about Jerry Butler.
Okay.
From Chicago.
Yeah.
And Jerry Butler was, oh man, they called him the Iceman. He was so cool on stage, and to watch how he just handled the Apollo Theater. I mean, what a lesson it was, for me at that point, and my first time with Little Anthony Imperial. Anyway, that I was with Little Anthony Imperial for 10 years after that. But awesome. I only did the East Coast. I was their second keyboard player on the East Coast. And then in 2002 or 3, and that's how I came out to the West Coast. They offered me a gig to be their conductor.
Okay.
So I came out to Vegas. We were all living in Vegas, and we had a 3-wall deal in Vegas, and they eventually changed the deal. They didn't like the deal. They got out of the deal, but I was stuck in Vegas. And I was out there, and so that was 13 and a half months later, and I decided to leave them, and after 13 and a half months, and then I went down to LA. I was working with an actor, a very famous actor, who was a good singer, beautiful singer. And in fact, he was probably one of the top voiceover people in America for a long time.
Good, cool.
And so I had produced some things for him. I was musical directing his show in New York, and we were friends too. And so I called him up. I said, hey, man, do you want to do some music, man? If I came to L.A., man, would I have a job, And he said, yeah,
those are good questions to ask, right, before making a move.
Exactly. He said, yeah, man, come on to L.A. And so I came to L.A. My daughter we moved to, if you can believe this, man, we lived in Dolphin Marina, and we moved to Frank Sinatra's old bachelor pad.
Oh, wow.
And that's where my daughter was conceived and born, in that apartment.
That's a special place.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah. And that's how I ended up out west. And I was here for about, I don't know, maybe about 8 years before, in 2000, I guess it was 2011, things the bottom kind of fell out here, and we weren't working as much and all. And my in-laws were having some issues, and they needed they needed our help, and so we moved in 2011. We moved back to the East Coast, to Massachusetts, for 6 years, and 5 years. No, I'm sorry, for 6 months, and we helped them with an issue that they had. And then I moved down to Mexico. You know, me, my daughter, and my ex-wife. We moved down to Mexico, and that's when I had to reinvent myself there. And I started creating these extravaganza shows for the big hotels, and for and then my ex-wife, and I, we had a duo that we did together, and so we found lots of work doing that, and we did really, really well. And I was there until my mom got sick. In 2015, she got sick, and then I came back to New York to take care of her. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 2013 it was, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as Mexico, you mentioned, what area of Mexico was this?
Yeah, so we moved down to Playa del Carmen, right?
Okay.
And wait, now you talking about? I was just doing I was just submitting myself for a commercial just recently. And they were asking, they were looking for, guys who were older, who had, some chutzpah in life,
Right.
And they, one of the things they would ask, do you cliff dive? Do you ride a motorcycle? Blah, all these daredevil things, Well, the truth be told, yes, I rode a motorcycle for 15 years, but I don't ride anymore. But I used to ride for 15 years. But I would say that the bravest thing I ever did in my life was to move to Mexico with 4 strikes against me. I didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, didn't have a place to live, and I didn't speak the language.
Oh, wow.
And we got down there, man. Within a week, I had a job, had a place to live, and was beginning to speak the language, was beginning to know some people, literally 7 days,
That is cool.
Yeah, we had a nice little run in Mexico too, but, family calls, man, you got to do what you got to do,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Michael, lately there has been a lot of things happening in the world, but I guess more close to home as an artist and as a person that is involved with people and involved with relationships and everything else. There's this thing with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. They had some differences, some things were said, some things were published that were alleged, but it turns out, according to a ruling yesterday in court, in the favor of Johnny Depp. I mean, what would you say on that as far as either propelling or setting women back when people make claims like that are unfounded?
Well, I'll have to say this, is that, I knew that this was going on, the trial was going on and all. I would get little messages with my phone, but quite honestly, I did not follow this trial. I don't know anything at all about it, really. So if I was to speak about it, it would all be very speculative because I really don't know. So, I don't really have anything to say about it. Although I would say that I like Johnny Depp as an artist. I mean, I've definitely dug his movies. I would say that, but in terms of his personal life, listen, I can imagine it would be a mess. I can imagine, but I don't know for sure. So I can't really speak about it, you know?
Understood. Well, yeah, I mean, in short, she made some claims. She did an op-ed in 2018, publishing some things about being a victim of domestic abuse and so forth. There was never any sort of claim, made in any sort of criminal courts, or nothing involving the police per se that involved them. However, what was said, he felt was damaging and was hearsay. Right. And he lost employment. He lost working with Disney, being, Captain Jack, which is a very, very, very
lucrative,
well-known sort of character, in that, in that franchise with Disney. But at the end of the day, yesterday, he won his case, and quoting his words, he's got his life back. So again, there may be people that are not really keeping up with it, but I guess the issue is that she made some false claims, and it seems like there is a history of certain people being believed on face value. And I feel very terrible for any woman that is a victim of any type of abuse. I think that's a reprehensible thing. It's terrible. But I also feel as though by making these claims, for whatever reason, it's possible that you're setting back legitimate things that come up. In other words, all eyes are on her now because she's done this. She lost her case. Maybe she will appeal. You know, it was a $10 million plus settlement in his favor. And as of this morning, she doesn't have the money to pay it. So do you feel, without knowing the details of the case, but those are the facts as they are, that that's setting women back?
Well, I do know that we're living in a very, very difficult time right now, where there are many issues, all kinds of issues, not only women issues, but all kinds of issues. And the only thing that I can say about it is that I think it's important for people in general, to be open to discuss these things, to be open to be right, be open to be wrong about things. And that's kind of where I'm at, when it comes to issues, that I really, as I said, I'm not intimately involved in this case. I don't really know the details. I just know a little bit about what I have heard,
Sure.
And that's another issue.
Yeah.
What about the truth? How is the truth being manipulated these days? That's, I think everybody can pretty much agree that the truth is being manipulated. We are being manipulated in many different ways.
Yes.
So with all these things considered, in regards to this case, and even women, the issues that women face in their lives, the only thing that I can say about it, honestly, is that I try to be empathetic, open, understanding, and I just have to leave it at that, because I don't really know the issues, the truth about things, I wouldn't say that, of course, if I intimately was involved or knew something about, a case or some sort of a court, proceedings that were going on,
Okay. Yeah, understood. As a single dad, and as a musician, as an artist, as a composer, all of these things, how do you balance out the time and the love and the nurturing, and then the business side of things, and getting gigs and managing them? What's an average day like for you, and how do you balance it all out?
That is like the greatest question ever, that I'm faced with right now in my life. I never thought that my life would lead me to this place, but I embrace it full-heartedly, and I actually do the very best that I can do. But there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of things that I'm trying to to do, and I'm starting a in a sense, I'm starting a new business. Because I didn't tell you this, but I went back to school, as you mentioned NYU. I went back to school at NYU in 2016 after I got back to New York, and I graduated in 2018. So I finally finished my master's in music, but it was in music composition. But that's what I was studying at IU 40 years ago. But now I got a master's in scoring for film and multimedia.
Beautiful.
So I came back out here to California, and I've been like in 2020, I guess it was, maybe 2021. I did 4 films between 2020 and the beginning of 2021, but they were just smaller films. But I did get nominated for Best Original Score.
Awesome.
With a girl that I met at NYU, a composer by the name of Prue Montin. She's from Australia, and the two of us did the score for an Australian film that we were nominated for Best Original Score at the St. Kilda Film Festival. We didn't win, but we got nominated. In a sense, that's kind of a win. So when I wake up in the morning, I have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 sometimes, and make my way into my studio, and I try to compose and write music until my daughter wakes up, and she usually wakes up around 7:30, something like that, and she comes storming into the studio, demanding some time and action.
She makes her presence known.
She makes her presence known, man. And but I have a team of people that help me, and they try to tell her, be gentle on your dad. If you go in, just say hi and then leave, So, but most of the time she comes in and we chat for a while.
Okay.
And then eventually I might be able to get her to leave, and that because I'm not on until 8 o'clock. You see,
Yeah.
8 o'clock comes breakfast time, and 9 o'clock I'm homeschooling. So 9 o'clock we start homeschooling, and from 9 to 12 usually it takes me to homeschool. 12 o'clock is lunch. If we're not finished with homeschooling, we got to go back at 1 o'clock, and so we do a little bit more homeschooling at 1 o'clock. But hopefully we're done by 12. And then we go out and we play sports and we get some exercise. And then she has therapies in the afternoon on a couple days a week. And so we got to deal with all of that, But tell you the truth, man, by the time 5 o'clock comes, I've been up hitting it hard since 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted.
Wow.
And I still got to make dinner,
Wow.
So then I make dinner for us, and then we have dinner usually, 5:30, 6 o'clock or whatever, And then we, sit around, we talk a little bit, and maybe we might catch a movie or something like that. And then, I try to, get to bed early if I can. And it doesn't always work out that way, but sometimes it does. And I got business to do too. So, sometimes I can, on the days that she has therapy, I can sneak back into the studio and do a little bit of my business, trying to in order to keep my business moving forward. And I have this new angle now where I'm, doing the film scoring and all. So I have this certain pursuits that I'm making in terms of all of that as well, But a large amount of my income, comes from me playing live. So I have to do all of that, and it's a lot. But
Yeah.
I do have a couple of people that are in my life that kind of help me. There's a woman that I hire to help me with, my marketing. But I can also, we can also devote a week to, hey, would you find some really good leads for me to, investigate? So she'll, come up with a couple of names of some agents for composers, or some musical supervisors, or a new agent for my live show, because now now that I'm single, I've started to do just a one-man show. I just play piano and I sing, and that's what I've been doing mostly. And I work at, one of the casinos, and for a long time I was doing one of the clubs around. But I make pretty good money doing it, and so I just can't go out and, and do anything, because, I want to come home with, I want to get a bang for my time, my energy, so to speak.
It's got to be right.
It's got to be right.
For your situation. Yeah, completely understood. When you talk about doing a live show or a residency versus doing a scoring sort of gig, what is the difference from your viewpoint of, actually acquiring it? I know you have somebody helping you a bit with the marketing, but in other words, as an artist that is looking for gigs, it's a very similar thing. We send out EPKs, we knock on the door, sometimes personally, or we network with other musicians, getting in certain venues. What about getting a film scoring gig? How is that different? What are you actually doing?
Well, the gigs that I've gotten recently scoring films. Now, I should tell you this, that early in my career, back in the '80s, I used to do a lot of film scoring, but I was just doing, and I didn't study it or anything. I just grabbed a book and started reading about it, and there was enough information in the book that I could start to score some films. But I was basically doing like Fortune 500 companies, it was just doing like industrial films. And I did like the opening exhibit at the ATT Museum in New York City. I did the music for the opening. This was back in the '80s, And I worked for Northwestern Mutual Life. I did their industrial movie, and a bunch of Fortune 500 companies, And so,
did you actually knock on the door to get those?
No, what happened was, I had a friend, and it's always about relationships.
Yes, it is.
I had a friend who, actually, he wasn't really my friend. He was my mother's friend, because my mother just loved this kid. He was about my age, and he used to love to go to the library. He was a real bookworm, And when we were kids, now I never knew him, but he used to go to my mother's library, and my mother knew him and loved him, And so they were friends, and fast forward 20 years or 25 years or however long it was, maybe it wasn't quite that long, 15, 20 years, somehow, I don't even know how we met, but then we discovered that he knew my mother.
Okay.
And he immediately was on like that because he had such a strong connection with my mother. Anyway, I happened to see him walking down the street, and because I lived on 95th Street between Central Park West and Columbus for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, he was walking down the street. Come to find out, now this guy was a brilliant designer. Like he designed, like graphic designer,
Okay. Okay.
and he was working for a company that was located on my block, and he told them about me because they needed somebody to score movies that they were doing, and that's how it happened. So I never left my house. They always knocked on my door. We'd have meetings in my house or meetings up the street in their place, and I just scored their film.
So the universe sort of just brought it to you.
It just brought it to me.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Michael, what would you say to a young artist that, sort of just starting out, wants to get into the area of film scoring or performing live, and maybe they're on keys or vocals or maybe some other instrument? What words of wisdom would you offer to them?
Well, I could say this very easily, because I said this to the head of the music scoring department at NYU. I said it to maybe one or two of the professors there, is that, this is sacrilegious to have a program where you don't teach these students the business of music.
Yeah.
You need to teach them how to do business. And they said, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. But you could tell when I said it, they're not going to do anything about it.
Sure.
And I get the idea. I get the idea because the curriculum is pretty full, but at the same time, they're doing an injustice to these students. I tell you, that's the one thing I missed in my education.
Okay.
I wish they had given me some idea what it would be like, having to run your own business when you got out of school. So that's what I would say to all the young musicians coming through. Number one, learn something about the business, and you can learn as you go, yes, and you're going to do that anyway. But if you could have some backgrounds, a little bit more information, I know I would have gone a lot further if I had to understand just how important networking was. To understanding how important it was to keep your books in order, to have an idea of where you've been and where you're going, all these things, strategizing, all these things are super, super important. I remember watching a special I don't know if it was about Quincy Jones or whether or not he was just in it, but in this special, he found some old books that he used to keep about his business, and he was talking about, and he lists his arrangements and who the arrangements were for and how much money he made. I mean, it was no money at all. He was saying, yeah, I made $20 on that one or whatever, but you could see how detailed he was and how methodical he was in terms of keeping his books and his records.
Sure.
It's all important, and it also I think spills over into your ability to make music. I think it's really, really important as a musician, to never leave any stone unturned. Learn as much as you can, practice as much as you can. It's super, super important.
Absolutely. I completely concur, and have had similar experiences in my upbringing as a musician, as an artist, not being as versed as I should be on the business side, but then learning from my mistakes and going to get a bachelor's and an MBA in business, and then teaching music business at the college level to really make up for that, and to help others, to push others forward, because musicians tend to be, one way or the other. And I think we should have the left brain and the right brain. We definitely need to be proficient with the music business, contracts, royalties, negotiating, and what the standards and practices are in the area that, keep you protected, But with that said, thank you so much, Michael, for coming today. Blessings to you in your career.
Thank you.
And then just sort of in parting, I wanted to mention a recent single you did. Where can people hear that single?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I'm always making records,
Hmm.
and my most recent single is called "Another Day in Paradise," and
Is that available on Spotify, or where
that's
can they hear that?
Spotify, iMusic, everywhere,
Okay,
anywhere,
okay,
anywhere. You can
okay,
find it. You can buy my website, soulray.com, soulraye.com. Anywhere, it's out there. It's out
okay.
there.
Another Day in Paradise.
Another Day
Okay,
in
so everybody
Paradise.
can look that up and listen to that, download it.
Yeah.
And then when's the next time I'm going to be doing something live? People can come hear you.
I'm going
Anything
to
on the
be
books?
Saturday. This Saturday, I'm going to be at Hamul Casino.
Okay,
Yeah,
beautiful.
from 5 to 8 at the steakhouse there. It's
Oh,
called Prime Cut.
and you do a solo piano thing there?
Solo piano, yeah,
Beautiful.
from 5 to 9.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, listen, everybody, check out Michael Raye and the things that he's doing. Beautiful. Once again, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Dante. Appreciate it.
Blessings.